"Please, make it fast," said the orc warrior. The human froze, but his actions impressed her. The battlefield smelled like what endings smell like: iron, smoke, the particular stench of bodies that would never go home. Thara had been to 17 battles in her 28 years, and they all ended the same way, with silence that felt heavier than all the screaming that came before it. She sat propped against what used to be a supply wagon, now just splinters and ash. Around her, the ruins of Northridge Valley stretched in every direction like a graveyard that forgot to bury its dead. Human bodies, orc bodies, so many bodies that after a while, green skin and pale skin didn't seem all that different anymore, just meat that used to be people. Thara's left leg wasn't working right. Hadn't been working right since the warhammer caught her knee 3 hours ago, or was it 4? Time did funny things when you were bleeding. The wound in her side kept leaking despite the field bandage she'd tied with strips from a dead soldier's cloak. Didn't matter whose cloak, dead was dead. Her fingers found the bone flute at her belt, tracing the familiar grooves without thinking. Keth had carved those patterns when he was 12, all proud of the spirals that meant strength through family in the old orc tongue. He'd been 14 when a human arrow found his throat. 28 battles ago. No, 3 years ago. Numbers were getting slippery in her head. The sun was doing that thing where it turned everything gold, right before it gave up for the day. Thara had always liked sunsets. Seemed fitting she'd get to see one more. That's when she heard the footsteps. Not the heavy march of a formation, just one person, picking their way through the debris, trying to be quiet and failing because armor doesn't do quiet, no matter how carefully you step. Thara's hand went to her axe before her brain caught up and reminded her that her hand wasn't strong enough to lift it anymore. The weapon lay 3 feet away, blade down in the mud like a grave marker. Might as well have been 3 miles. The footsteps stopped. Thara looked up and saw him standing there. Human. Young. Couldn't be more than 25, probably less. Still had that look in his eyes like the world might start making sense if he just tried hard enough to understand it. War hadn't beaten that out of him yet. He was tall for a human, nearly her height, with dark hair matted with sweat and grime. His armor was standard infantry issue, marked with the silver hawk of the Northern Kingdom. The sword in his hand shook, just slightly. Just enough that Thara knew he'd never had to decide whether to kill someone who wasn't fighting back. She'd seen this moment before. On the other side, usually. When you found an enemy wounded and alone, there were 2 choices: quick mercy or slow death. Nobody ever chose the slow one, unless they were the kind of monster that made other monsters uncomfortable. This boy didn't look like a monster. But then, monsters rarely did, until it was too late. "Please," Thara said, and hated how her voice cracked on the word. Warriors of the Blackstone clan didn't beg, but there was begging, and there was being practical. "Make it fast." The sword stopped shaking. The boy's eyes went wide, the kind of wide that happens when you realize the enemy you've been trained to hate your whole life just used the word "please" like a person. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sunset kept doing its golden thing. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out, probably excited about the feast waiting for it. And this human boy just stood there, sword raised, frozen like someone had turned him to stone mid-swing. Then he did something Thara didn't expect. He lowered the sword. He started, then stopped. Tried again. You're hurt." Thara would have laughed if laughing didn't feel like it would tear her in half. "You're observant. That's good. Means you might live long enough to regret what comes next." "What comes next?" "You kill me," Thara said, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "Quick through the heart or throat. I appreciate heart more. Throat takes longer, tastes like copper, not a good last taste." The boy's face did something complicated. Horror mixed with confusion, mixed with the kind of distress that came from discovering that the enemy bleeds the same red and thinks about what their last taste will be. "I can't," he said. "You can," Thara corrected. "It's easy. Pointy end goes in, life comes out. You've done it before. In battle, that's different." "Is it?" Thara tilted her head, studying him. "You've killed orcs before." I can see it in the way you hold that sword. So what's different about me? You're not fighting. Would it help if I insulted your mother? Called you a coward? Threatened to feast on your liver? Thara tried to put some energy into the words, make them sound like the kind of thing a proper orc should say. But it came out tired. Everything came out tired now. Pick one. I'll try to make it convincing. The boy did something even stranger then. He sheathed his sword. Thara blinked. That's not how you kill someone. I'm not going to kill you. Then what are you going to do? We've been over the options. There's death and there's slower death. Those are the choices. No. The boy's voice got firmer, like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. There's a third option. I've been a warrior for 12 years, Thara said slowly. I've never seen a third option. The boy stepped closer. Thara's hand twitched toward her axe again, old instincts dying hard. But he kept his hands away from his weapon, just moved slow, like you'd approach a wounded animal, which Thara supposed she basically was. He knelt down beside her, close enough that she could smell the leather of his armor and the particular scent of human sweat, which wasn't so different from orc sweat when you thought about it. Close enough that if she had any strength left, she could have grabbed him by the throat. She didn't have any strength left. I'm Rylan, he said, which was possibly the most absurd thing to say to someone who might be dying. Then again, maybe it wasn't. Maybe knowing someone's name before you died was better than dying alone among strangers. Thara, she heard herself say. Thara. Rylan repeated her name carefully, getting the emphasis right on the first syllable, like he actually cared about pronouncing it correctly. Your leg is bad, and that wound in your side. He leaned closer, squinting at the blood-soaked bandage. That's from a blade, recent. If it doesn't get cleaned and stitched, I die, Thara finished. We covered that already. I asked for fast. You're making it slow. What if there was a way where you didn't die at all? Thara studied his face, looking for the trap, looking for the cruelty that had to be hiding somewhere behind those serious brown eyes. She'd seen humans show mercy before, usually right before they did something worse than killing. But this boy just looked earnest, genuinely, stupidly earnest in a way that was going to get him killed someday, maybe today. Why? Thara asked. Why what? Why would you save your enemy? Rylan was quiet for a moment. His hand moved to a small leather pouch at his belt, fingers drumming against it like he did when he was thinking. My brother died 2 years ago. At the Battle of Stone Meadow, an orc killed him. Thara felt something cold settle in her stomach. Here it came, the revenge, the hate, the reason this was all an elaborate way to make dying hurt more. I hated orcs after that, Rylan continued. His voice stayed steady, factual. Hated everything about them. Volunteered for every patrol, every raid. Wanted to kill as many as I could. Thought it would make the hate smaller. Did it? No. Rylan looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that Thara recognized because she'd seen it in her own reflection after Keth died. It just made more hate, more dead, more people like you and me sitting in ruins, wishing we'd died in battle instead of after. Thara's fingers found the bone flute again. Keth. Sweet, stupid Keth, who carved spirals and played songs that made warriors cry. My brother made this, she said, and wasn't sure why she was saying it. Maybe because they were both talking about dead brothers, and that made them something other than enemies for a minute. He wasn't a warrior, shouldn't have been at the battle where he died, but everyone fights eventually in a war that never ends. Rylan's eyes fixed on the flute. He was an artist. He was 14. The words hung there between them, heavy as the corpses surrounding them. 14, not a warrior, not a monster, just a boy who carved pretty spirals and died before he got to finish growing up. I can't give you your brother back, Rylan said quietly, and you can't give me mine. But maybe, he stopped, searching for words, maybe we don't have to keep making more dead brothers. Pretty philosophy, Thara said, but some of the bite had gone out of her voice. Doesn't change the situation. You're human, I'm orc. War is war. Then we changed the situation. Rylan stood up, moving with sudden decision. Can you walk? Not well. Can you walk at all? Thara tested her good leg, pushing against the wagon wreckage. Her left leg screamed, her side burned, but she managed to get upright, leaning heavily against the splintered wood. Define walk. Movement from point A to point B. Then maybe, slowly, if point B isn't very far. There's an old monastery about a mile west, abandoned during the early campaigns. Brother Matthias might still be there. He stayed behind to tend the wounded who couldn't be moved. A human monk, Thara said flatly, is going to heal an orc. Brother Matthias heals anyone with blood and breath, Ryland said. It's kind of his thing, annoyingly principled about it. Your people will hunt me. Not if they don't know you're there. Your people will execute you for helping an enemy. Not if they don't catch me. Thara looked at him, really looked at him. This boy who should have killed her, who had every reason to walk away, who was instead offering to risk everything for someone he'd been taught his whole life to hate. You're either incredibly brave, Thara said slowly, or incredibly stupid. Can't it be both? Despite everything, the pain, the blood loss, the sheer absurdity of the situation, Thara felt her mouth twitch, not quite a smile, but close. The kind of almost smile that happened when you met someone who was definitely going to be interesting right up until they got you both killed. Help me get my axe, she said. Ryland retrieved the weapon, grunting with effort. The axe was made for someone with orc strength, heavy enough to cleave through armor. He managed to lift it barely and brought it to her. Thara took it with her right hand, the one that still worked, and used it as a walking stick. Not exactly the dignified use her weapons master would have approved of. But dignity had stopped mattering somewhere around the please make it fast part. We walk slow, Ryland said, positioning himself on her left side, where the injury was worst. If you fall, I'm not strong enough to carry you, so don't fall. Inspiring. I'm working with what I have. They started moving. Thara's left leg dragged, sending fresh waves of pain with each step. The wound in her side pulled and wept, warm blood running down her hip, but she'd been hurt before. She knew how to split her brain into two parts, the part that felt pain and the part that kept moving despite it. The sun finished dying while they walked, painting the battlefield in shades of purple and grey. The ruins of Northridge Valley looked even more haunting in twilight, shadows turning corpses into abstract shapes that didn't look quite human or orc. Just remnants of violence. Why did you come to the battlefield? Thara asked after they'd gone maybe 100 yards. Talking helped, kept her brain focused on something other than the 1,000 different ways her body hurt. Looking for survivors from my unit, Ryland said. Found 3, helped them back to camp, came back for one more sweep. Lucky me. Is it luck? Finding someone who decides not to kill you? Don't know yet. Ask me again if I survive. They walked in silence for a while. The monastery came into view slowly, a squat stone building that looked like it had been built to last through apocalypses, which was good because it had seen several. Most of the windows were dark, but there was a flicker of candlelight in one of the lower rooms. Thara's vision was starting to blur at the edges. The specific kind of blur that said blood loss was catching up with intention. Her steps got heavier, slower. Stay with me, Ryland said, gripping her arm tighter. We're almost there. Heavy, Thara mumbled. Too heavy for a human. You're not that heavy. I've carried supply packs that weighed more. Liar. Okay, yes. Massive lie. You're extremely heavy, like carrying a very muscular boulder, but we're managing. Thara's mouth twitched again, that almost smile that was becoming a habit. You talk when you're nervous. Is it that obvious? Very. Humans do that. Talk to fill silence. What do orcs do? Grunt and hope the problem goes away. Does it work? Sometimes. Thara's leg gave out. She caught herself on Ryland's shoulder, pulling him down with her weight. They both staggered, nearly fell. Not this time. Just a little further, Ryland said, and his voice had gone tight with strain. Come on, Thara. You've survived this long. Don't quit on me now. Not quitting, resting. Rest when we get inside. Resting now. Thara, my brother's flute, Thara said, and her voice sounded far away even to herself. It's falling from my belt. Ryland looked down. The bone flute had indeed worked loose, hanging by a leather cord that was about to snap. He caught it before it fell, tucking it carefully into his own belt for safekeeping. "I've got it," he said, "but you need to keep moving, please." There was that word again, please. The word warriors weren't supposed to say. The word that made enemies into people asking for help. Thara took a breath, then another. Then she pushed off the ground with her axe and took another step. They made it to the monastery door before she collapsed. Ryland caught her, barely, and started shouting for Brother Matthias, with the kind of urgency that said he'd run out of calm and move straight into panic. Thara heard footsteps inside, saw a door open, spilling warm light. Then everything went soft and dark, and she let it take her. The last thing she felt was Ryland's hand on her shoulder, tight like an anchor. The last thing she heard was his voice saying, "I've got you, don't go anywhere," like she had a choice. When Thara woke up, she was warm. That was the first strange thing. Battlefields weren't warm. Death wasn't warm. So either she'd survived or the afterlife had better heating than expected. She opened her eyes slowly, cataloguing sensations the way she'd been taught. Pain, present but distant, wrapped in something fuzzy that might be medicine or might be her brain trying to be merciful. Breathing, easier than it should be with a hole in her side. Smell, herbs, soap, old stone, and the particular scent of boiled bandages that every healer's room shared across every culture. The ceiling above her was stone, marked with water stains and age. A single candle burned on a table nearby, throwing dancing shadows, and sitting in a chair against the wall, head tilted back in sleep, was the human boy who hadn't killed her. Rylan. Thara tried to sit up. Her body offered several detailed complaints about this decision, but nothing screamed imminent death, which was an improvement over the last time she'd been conscious. The movement woke Rylan. He jerked forward, nearly falling out of the chair, then blinked at her with the bleary confusion of someone who'd been asleep but was pretending he hadn't been. "You're awake," he said. "I'm awake," Thara confirmed. Her voice came out rough, like she'd been screaming. Maybe she had been during whatever healing had happened. "How long?" 2 days. Thara absorbed this. 2 days meant the battle was long over. 2 days meant armies had moved. 2 days meant she should probably be dead. "Why are you still here?" she asked. Ryland stood up, moving to a water pitcher on the table. He poured a cup and brought it to her, offering it with the kind of careful movement that said he wasn't sure if she'd take it or throw it at him. Thara took it, drank. The water tasted like hope and limestone. "Where else would I be?" Ryland said. "With your unit, your army. Literally anywhere that isn't a rebel monastery hiding an enemy soldier. Brother Matthias prefers Sanctuary for the Forgotten, actually. He thinks rebel monastery sounds too exciting." "You didn't answer my question." Ryland was quiet for a moment. Then he sat back down, and there was something different in his face, something that looked like he'd been thinking for 2 days straight and had come to some conclusions. "I told Commander Warren I was scouting the western woods for orc stragglers," he said. "Bought us time, but they'll send a patrol eventually." "Us," Thara repeated. "There's no us. You should leave before they come." "And go where? Back to killing orcs until one of them kills me? Back to hating so hard it burns a hole where my heart used to be?" Ryland leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been sitting here for 2 days, watching you breathe, watching Brother Matthias clean your wounds and stitch your side and set your leg. Watching someone who was supposed to be my enemy just be a person who hurt, a person who bled, a person who has a brother's flute tucked in her belt because she can't let go of him." Thara's hand went instinctively to her belt. Found nothing. Panic flared. "It's safe," Ryland said quickly, reaching into his own belt. He pulled out the bone flute, offering it to her with careful reverence. "I kept it with me, figured it was important." Thara took the flute, running her fingers over Keth's carvings, the spirals that meant family, the strength that came from not being alone. "You could have left," she said quietly. "Could have walked away, told yourself you did your good deed. No one would have blamed you. I would have." Thara looked at him, really looked at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the 3-day stubble on his jaw, at the way his hands kept moving to his sword, then away, like he couldn't decide if he was supposed to be a soldier or something else. "Your brother," she said, "at Stone Meadow. What was his name?" "Aidan." Ryland's voice went softer. "He was 19, wanted to be a blacksmith, signed up for the army because the wages were better, lasted 6 months. Keth was a musician," Thara said, surprising herself by sharing. "Terrible at fighting, amazing at songs. He joined the Blackstone Raiders because our father said every orc fights for the clan eventually. He lasted 2 battles. They sat in the silence of shared grief. 2 people who'd lost brothers to a war that had taken so many brothers. It had stopped counting them as people and started counting them as numbers in casualty reports. "I don't want more dead brothers," Ryland said finally. "Not human ones. Not orc ones. I'm tired of counting bodies and calling it victory. Doesn't change that we're on opposite sides of a war. Maybe we don't have to be. That's not how war works. Then maybe war is wrong." Thara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that hurt her side. "You think you can just decide war is wrong and walk away? Your commanders will execute you for desertion. My clan will kill me for consorting with humans. There's no world where this ends well. Not with that attitude. Not with any attitude. It's called reality. Reality is just what we agree to call things." Ryland stood up, started pacing. It was a small room, so his pacing just looked like nervous shuffling. "We called each other enemies, monsters, less than human, or less than orc. We agreed to that reality, and it made killing easier. But what if we agreed to something different? You're talking about 1 human and 1 orc," Thara said. "Not armies, not kingdoms, not clans, just us. Starts somewhere, doesn't it?" Ryland stopped pacing, looked at her. Every piece started with 1 person deciding not to kill 1 other person. "You're naive, probably, but I'm also alive. And so are you. And 2 days ago, we both should have been dead, so maybe naive isn't the worst thing to be." Before Thara could respond, a door creaked open. An older human entered, 50-something, with grey hair pulled back in a simple tie and robes that had seen better decades. His eyes were sharp and kind in equal measure, the kind of eyes that missed nothing and judged less. "Brother Matthias," Ryland said, "she's awake. I have ears, boy. I heard you philosophizing from the kitchen." Brother Matthias moved to Thara's bedside with practiced efficiency, checking her bandages and feeling her forehead for fever. "Your wounds are healing well, child. The leg will need time, but you'll walk again. The side was deeper than I'd like, but clean. No infection." "Thank you," Thara said, and meant it. Brother Matthias pulled out a small leather pouch from his robes, opening it to reveal dozens of smooth stones, each one different. He selected one, a piece of grey river rock, and placed it carefully back in the pouch. 47 souls, he said almost to himself. 48 now, counting you. "He collects stones," Ryland explained. "1 for every person he saves. Helps me remember they were real," Brother Matthias said. "Not numbers, not abstractions. Real people who hurt and bled and deserved to go home." He looked at Thara. "Even the green ones." Thara felt something in her chest do a complicated twist. This human monk who'd saved her life, who added a stone to his collection like she mattered, like she was worth counting. "How long until patrols find us?" she asked. 3 days, maybe 4, Brother Matthias said. "Commander Warren is thorough but cautious. He'll send scouts first. That gives us time." "Time for what?" "For you to heal enough to travel, and for this boy to decide what kind of man he's going to be." Brother Matthias looked at Ryland with the expression of someone who'd seen many young soldiers make many different choices. Easier to kill than to save. Safer, too. No one executes you for following orders. But easier doesn't mean right. "I'm not going back," Ryland said. "I can't. Not after—" He gestured vaguely at Thara. "Not after seeing that we're the same. We hurt the same. Bleed the same. Mourn the same. Then you'll need to leave before the patrols arrive," Brother Matthias said. "Both of you. There are places in the borderlands where neither side's law reaches very far. Settlements of deserters, refugees, people who got tired of choosing sides. It's not easy living, but it's living." "I don't know the borderlands," Thara said. "I do." Ryland's voice got firmer. Passed through them during training. There's a town called Haven's Rest, appropriately named. Former soldiers from both sides. They have rules. No fighting, no past. Just present and future. Sounds too good to be true. Probably is. But it's better than here. Thara tested her leg again, flexing her foot. Pain, but manageable. The kind of pain that whispered possibilities instead of screaming limitations. She could walk, maybe even run if she had to. But running meant leaving everything. Her clan, her honor, the only identity she'd ever known. She looked at Rylan, at this human who should have killed her but chose a harder path. At Brother Matthias, who kept stones to remember the saved. At the bone flute in her hands that still smelled like Keth's carving oil. Some choices didn't feel like choices. They felt like falling, like stepping off a cliff and hoping there was ground below instead of just more falling. 2 days ago I asked you to make it fast, Thara said slowly. You chose different. Now I'm choosing different too. Rylan's face did something complicated. Relief mixed with fear, mixed with the kind of hope that hurt, because you wanted it so badly, but knew it could break you if it didn't work out. We leave at dawn, he said, before the patrols arrive. Brother Matthias will give us supplies and a map, and then we figure it out as we go. Together. Together. The word felt foreign. Orcs didn't do together with humans. Humans didn't do together with orcs. But maybe that's what made it worth trying, because it was impossible and terrifying and probably doomed to fail spectacularly. But it was also alive, and alive beat dead every single time. Thara held out her hand, her right hand, the one that still worked properly. Rylan looked at it for a moment, understanding the weight of the gesture. In orc culture, you didn't touch someone unless you trusted them not to use that touch to hurt you. He took her hand. His grip was firm, but not crushing. Human, but not weak. Deal, Thara said. Deal, Rylan echoed. And in that moment, with their hands clasped and Brother Matthias watching with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just added another stone to his collection of impossibilities, something shifted. Small, fragile, but real. The war didn't stop. The hatred didn't disappear. The world didn't suddenly become kind and understanding. But two people who should have been enemies chose different. And sometimes that's how peace starts. Dawn came too early and too grey, the kind of morning that looked like it couldn't decide between fog and rain and chose both. Thara stood at the monastery door, testing her weight on her bad leg. Better, not good, but better. Brother Matthias's healing had been thorough. The wound in her side was closed and bound, the knee stable, even if it complained about rapid movement. Rylan was checking supplies one last time. Bread, dried meat, water skins, bandages, and a map sketched on what looked like the back of a prayer scroll. Brother Matthias wasn't big on wasting materials. The path west follows the old trade road for 3 miles, Brother Matthias said, tracing the route with a finger that trembled slightly with age. Then you'll need to cut north through the Whispering Woods, stay off the main roads. Both armies patrol them heavily. There's a river ford at the old mill. Cross there and you'll be in the borderlands by nightfall tomorrow. Thank you, Rylan said. For everything. Don't thank me yet. You're walking into a life that has no home and no certainty. Most people who run to the borderlands don't last a year. Brother Matthias looked at them both, his sharp eyes measuring. But you two, you might be stubborn enough to make it work. Is that a compliment? Thara asked. It's an observation. What you make of it is up to you. Brother Matthias pulled out his leather pouch of stones, running his fingers over them, like prayer beads. 48 souls saved. Every one of them chose to keep living when dying would have been easier. That takes a particular kind of strength. He handed Thara a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When she opened it, she found extra bandages, a jar of healing salve, and a water-smooth stone the color of jade. For your collection, Brother Matthias said, when you save someone, and you will, add them to it. Remember that salvation isn't just about big heroic moments. Sometimes it's just choosing not to kill when killing would be easier. Thara closed her fingers around the stone. It was warm from being in the monk's pocket. "I'm not a healer." "No, but you're someone who survived when you shouldn't have. That makes you qualified to help others do the same." Ryland shouldered his pack, adjusting the straps. His armor was gone, too recognizable, too loud for traveling light. He wore simple traveler's clothes now, brown and grey, the kind that said nothing about who you were or where your loyalty lay. Thara had kept her orc leathers, but removed all the clan markings. Bare leather felt naked, wrong. But wearing the Blackstone sigil into the Borderlands would be like wearing a target. "Ready?" Rylan asked. "No," Thara said honestly, "but that's never stopped me before." They left the monastery as the sun was trying to break through the grey. The trade road was empty, which was both good and concerning. Empty meant no patrols. Empty also meant no witnesses if they ran into trouble. They walked in silence for the first hour. Not uncomfortable silence, just the quiet of two people saving their breath for walking. Thara's leg held up better than expected. The knee was stiff but functional, and the pain had settled into a dull throb that was easy to ignore once you got moving. Around mid-morning, Ryland broke the quiet. "Tell me about your clan." "Why?" "Because if we're doing this, running away, starting new, I should probably know more about you than just your name and the fact that you don't die easy." Thara considered this. Sharing clan stories with a human felt like betrayal, but then she'd already committed betrayal the moment she chose to leave. Might as well be thorough about it. "Blackstone clan," she said. "Northern mountains. We're raiders mostly. Fast strikes. Take what we need, disappear before the humans can mobilize. We don't have farms like valley orcs, too rocky, so we take from those who have. So, bandits." "Survivors," Thara corrected. "There's a difference. Bandits take for greed. We take because winter in the mountains means you starve or you steal." Fair distinction. Ryland stepped over a fallen log, offering a hand to help her across. Thara ignored it. She could manage, but appreciated that he'd offered. "What about family?" "Besides Keth. Mother died in childbirth with my younger sister. Sister lasted 2 days. Father raised us alone until he took an arrow in the spine during a raid. Been paralyzed below the waist for 6 years now. Lives with my uncle's family." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He's alive. That's more than most warriors get." They walked through a stretch of birch trees, silver bark peeling like old scrolls. The forest was waking up. Birds calling, small animals rustling through undergrowth, normal sounds, the kind that said no one was hunting them yet. "My turn," Thara said. "Tell me about your family." "Not much to tell. Father's a tanner. Mother helps with the business. 3 kids, had 3 kids. Aiden was the oldest. I'm the middle. Sister Ellen is 16, wants to be a scholar." Ryland's voice went soft. "Told them I was enlisting for the pay. Easier than admitting I was enlisting because I wanted to kill orcs for revenge." "Did you kill many orcs?" 6. Ryland said it flat. Factual. 7 if you count the one I wounded who probably didn't make it. Every one of them had faces, expressions. One of them begged, another fought until his last breath. The 6th one just looked tired. "War makes us all tired," Thara said. "Yeah, it does." They reached the edge of the Whispering Woods by early afternoon. The trees here were older, darker, tangled with undergrowth that required careful navigation. The path Brother Matthias had marked wasn't a real path, more a suggestion of where the forest was slightly less hostile. "Stay close," Thara said. "These woods have a reputation." "For what?" "For making people disappear. Old magic, maybe. Or just good hiding spots for things that don't want to be found." Comforting. They pushed deeper into the woods. The canopy overhead blocked most of the light, turning afternoon into perpetual twilight. Sounds changed. Fewer birds, more rustling that could be wind or could be something with teeth watching them pass. Thara's hand stayed near her axe. Ryland's hand stayed near his sword. They moved like what they were. 2 soldiers in enemy territory, except the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. An hour into the woods, they heard voices. Both of them froze. Ryland held up a hand. "Wait." Thara nodded, already scanning for cover. They moved off the non-path behind a massive oak tree with roots that created natural hiding spots. The voices got closer. Human. At least 3, maybe 4. Patrols. Waste of time, one was saying. If there were orc stragglers, they'd be long gone by now. Commander Warren wants every sector cleared, another responded. We clear every sector. Yeah, but... The voice cut off suddenly. You hear that? Thara's heart kicked into high gear. Ryland's hand went to his sword hilt, then stopped. Drawing a blade made noise. They needed absolute silence. Footsteps approached their hiding spot. Slow, searching. Probably just deer, the first voice said, but he didn't sound convinced. Check it anyway. A soldier came around the oak tree, young, maybe 20. Green enough that his armor still shined. He saw Ryland first, saw the traveler's clothes, the carefully neutral expression. Then he saw Thara. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened to shout. Ryland moved. Fast. His hand came up, covering the soldier's mouth. His other arm wrapped around the boy's chest, pulling him close, in a hold that looked like a hug, but was actually complete immobilization. Don't, Ryland whispered. Urgent. Please don't. The soldier struggled. His friends were maybe 20 feet away. One shout would bring them running. One shout would end everything. Thara stepped forward, locking eyes with the young soldier. She kept her axe at her belt, hands visible and empty. We don't want to hurt you, she said quietly. We just want to leave. Let us leave. The soldier's eyes were panicked. He'd probably never seen an orc this close who wasn't trying to kill him, probably spent months hearing horror stories about green-skinned monsters who ate babies and drank blood. And here was one, telling him they didn't want to hurt him. Your name, Ryland said, his voice gentle but firm. Tell me your name. Nod, if you can do that. The soldier nodded shakily. Ryland slowly removed his hand from the boy's mouth, ready to cover it again if he tried to shout. Jacob, the soldier whispered. Private Jacob. Jacob, I'm Ryland. This is Thara. We're not going to hurt you. But we need you to be quiet. Can you do that? Jacob's eyes bounced between them. You're the orc from the monastery. Commander Warren has patrols looking for you. I know, Thara said. That's why we're leaving. Going to the borderlands, never coming back. He'll have me executed if he finds out I let you go. He won't find out, Ryland said. You tell him you searched this sector. Found nothing. We were never here. I can't... Yes, you can. Ryland's voice got harder. You can choose. Same way I chose when I found her dying on a battlefield. You can kill us. Try anyway. Or you can let us go and tell yourself you never saw anything. Jacob's friends called out from deeper in the woods. Jacob, find anything? Time compressed. The moment stretched thin. Jacob looked at Thara, at Ryland, at the path that led deeper into the borderlands, and away from a war that had already taken too much from everyone. Nothing! Jacob shouted back. Just a deer trail! Thara felt something release in her chest. Thank you, Ryland said. Jacob pulled away, stepping back but not running, not shouting. You need to go, now. They'll want to sweep this area twice. We're going, Thara said. She's really not going to eat me, Jacob asked, and there was actual curiosity behind the fear now. I only eat humans on Tuesdays, Thara said. Today's Wednesday. Jacob's face did something between terror and realization that she was joking. It landed somewhere near confused respect. Go, he said again. Before I remember I'm supposed to be a loyal soldier. Ryland gripped Jacob's shoulder once, brief, grateful. Then they were moving. Fast. As fast as Thara's leg would allow. Behind them, they heard Jacob rejoining his patrol, heard him telling them the sector was clear. They didn't slow down until they'd put an hour between them and the patrol. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Thara leaned against a tree, leg throbbing. That was close, she said. Too close. Ryland's hands were shaking slightly. Post-adrenaline. If he'd shouted, but he didn't. Why? Why would he let us go? Same reason you didn't kill me, Thara said. Because once you see someone as a person, it's harder to make them into a monster. They reached the river ford just before sunset. The old mill brother Matthias had mentioned was exactly where his map said it would be. A crumbling structure half collapsed into the water, wheels still and covered with moss. The river ran shallow here, easy to cross if you didn't mind wet boots. They crossed as the last light died. On the far bank, Thara turned to look back at the whispering woods. Back at the world she was leaving, her clan, her father, everything she'd ever known about who she was supposed to be. Second thoughts? Rylan asked. Fifth or sixth thoughts, Thara corrected. But I'm still here. Me too. They made camp a half-mile from the ford, in a clearing that offered visibility in all directions. No fire, too risky. They ate dried meat and hard bread in darkness, listening to the sounds of a forest that belonged to neither human nor orc territory. Play something, Rylan said suddenly. Thara looked at him. What? The flute. Play something. I haven't played since Keth died. I know. But maybe... Rylan pulled the bone flute from his belt, offering it to her. Maybe it's time. Thara took the flute. Keth's carvings felt familiar under her fingers. She'd watched him make this, sitting by the fire in their father's hall, watched him test each note, adjusting the holes until the sound was perfect. She brought it to her lips, tried to remember. The first note came out shaky, uncertain, the second better. By the third, she remembered the song, an old orc lullaby that mothers sang to children to keep the nightmares away. The melody was simple, haunting. It spoke of mountains and moonlight and being safe even when the world wasn't safe. When she finished, her eyes were wet. That was beautiful, Rylan said quietly. Keth taught me, before he learned to fight. Before the war made him into a soldier instead of a musician. He'd be proud of you for running away, for choosing to live. Rylan shifted closer, and there was something in his face that made Thara's breath catch. For being brave enough to be something other than what they told you to be. They sat in the darkness, shoulders almost touching. Two people who'd walked away from everything. Two people who had nothing except each other and the hope that nothing might be enough. Rylan, Thara said. Yeah? Thank you for not making it fast. Thank you for letting me choose different. The night settled around them, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. They took turns on watch, sleeping in shifts, trusting each other with their lives in the way only people who'd already saved each other could. And when dawn came, they kept walking, away from war, toward whatever waited in the borderlands. Together, the borderlands earned their name honestly. They weren't just geographical boundaries, they were the space where all boundaries got fuzzy, where law meant whatever the strongest person with the biggest weapon said it meant, where you could be anyone because no one asked who you used to be. Heaven's Rest sat in a valley between two ridges, looking like someone had collected every architectural style from every culture and thrown them at a town without a plan. Human stone foundations, orc timber supports, elven glass windows somehow intact despite the chaos. Buildings leaned against each other like drunk friends walking home. The sign at the town entrance was written in 3 languages. Common, Orcish, and what looked like Dwarvish. It said simply, no past, no fighting, no questions. Home, sweet home, Rylan muttered. They'd spent 2 more days travelling, avoiding patrols, sleeping rough. Thara's leg had held up better than expected. Brother Matthias's healing was quality work. By the time they reached Haven's Rest, she was barely limping. The streets were exactly what you'd expect from a town of refugees and deserters. Humans walking past orcs with careful neutrality, a dwarf arguing prices with an elf at a market stall. Children of mixed heritage playing in the dirt, too young to understand why they shouldn't exist. There, Rylan pointed to a building that might have been an inn, or might have been someone's house that got too big. The sign said, "The Forgetful Dragon," in crooked letters. Inside, the common room was crowded with the kind of people who had stories they'd never tell. A human with orc clan tattoos on his neck, an orc woman wearing human peasant clothes, a mixed group playing cards with the aggressive friendship of people who'd decided their differences didn't matter anymore. The innkeeper was a massive orc male with 1 tusk missing, and scars that suggested he'd earned his retirement from whatever violence he'd left behind. He looked up as they entered, eyes assessing them with the practiced speed of someone who could spot trouble before trouble spotted itself. "New arrivals," he said. Not a question. You running or visiting? Running, Thara said. No point lying in a place built on not asking questions. From? The Northern Campaign. Both sides. The innkeeper grunted, a sound of understanding. Rooms are 2 copper a night. 5 copper gets you meals. Work if you want to stay longer. Always need hands. Rules are simple. No fighting inside the town. No past names. No recruitment for either side. Break the rules, we break you. Understand? Understood, Ryland said. Good. You're in room 7, up the stairs, end of the hall. Roof leaks when it rains, but the bed's clean and the door has a lock. The innkeeper pushed a key across the bar. Welcome to Haven's Rest, or what passes for rest around here. Room 7 was small. 1 bed, 1 window, 1 chair that looked like it might collapse if you sat on it wrong. But it had 4 walls, and a door and a lock, which made it the closest thing to safety either of them had felt in weeks. Thara sat on the bed, carefully, testing the frame. It held. Ryland took the chair, which creaked but didn't break. So, Thara said. Now what? Now we figure out how to live, Ryland said. Find work. Build something that isn't about killing. Maybe see if it's possible for 2 people from different worlds to make 1 new world that works. That sounds exhausting. Probably is. Ryland smiled. Small, tired, but real. But we've done harder things. We survived a war. We walked away from everything. We can probably manage a life. Thara pulled out the bone flute, turning it over in her hands. Keth's carvings caught the late afternoon light coming through the window. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Me too. What if this doesn't work? What if we get caught? What if it does work? Ryland interrupted. What if we build something good? What if we prove that choosing different was right? You're doing that optimism thing again. Someone has to. A knock on the door made them both tense. Old instincts, old fears. But this was Haven's Rest. No past, no fighting. Ryland opened the door. A young human woman stood there, maybe 19, with a child on her hip. The child had green-tinged skin and small tusks just starting to grow in. Sorry to bother, the woman said. I'm Mara. This is Kev. We live next door. Heard you were new. Thara said. This is Rylan. Rylan like the name, or Rylan like you used to be someone else? Just Rylan. Mara smiled. The kind of smile that said she understood. Just Mara, then. Welcome. It's not much here, but it's honest. You need anything, knock. Community's what keeps us alive in a place like this. Thank you, Ryland said. Mara left. The child, Kev, waved with a chubby hand as the door closed. A human and an orc, Thara said, processing what they'd just seen, had a child together. Seems like it. And they're alive, living here, raising a family. Seems like it, Ryland repeated. Thara looked at him, really looked at him, at this human who'd chosen mercy over duty, who'd walked away from everything, who sat here now in a tiny room in a forgotten town, still choosing her. Ryland, yeah? Come sit with me. The chair looks like it's going to murder you. Ryland moved to the bed, sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, close enough that Thara could feel his warmth, his breath, his absolute solid presence. I'm glad you didn't make it fast, Thara said quietly. I'm glad you let me choose different. Thara turned to face him. His eyes were brown and serious, and full of something that looked a lot like hope, mixed with fear, mixed with the kind of determination that had walked them all the way to the borderlands. What are we doing? She asked. I think, Ryland said slowly, we're figuring out that enemies is something people made up. That underneath all the green skin and pale skin and propaganda, we're just people who hurt and hope and want to matter to someone. That's very philosophical. I've had time to think. Thara reached for his hand. Ryland's fingers closed around hers. Gentle, firm, careful. His thumb traced the scar on her knuckle, the one she'd gotten at 15 during her first real fight. I don't know how to do this, Thara admitted. Whatever this is. Me neither. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together. Together, Thara echoed. That word again, the impossible word that was starting to feel possible. She leaned forward. Ryland met her halfway. Their foreheads touched, an orc gesture of trust and intimacy. His breath was warm on her face. Her hand tightened on his. "Is this insane?" Thara whispered. "Completely," Rylan whispered back. "Good. I hate boring." They sat like that as the sun set outside, turning the sky pink and orange. Two people from different worlds building one new world between them. It was small, it was fragile, but it was theirs. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. Thara found work at the blacksmith. Turned out orc strength was valuable when you needed someone to work the heavy forge. The blacksmith was a dwarf named Borin, who asked no questions and paid fair wages, and occasionally shared tips about metalwork that Thara had never learned in her clan. Rylan ended up helping at the inn, the massive orc innkeeper who went by Boss. Because old names didn't matter here, needed someone who could deal with both human and orc customers, someone who understood both cultures. Rylan was qualified by virtue of having been both enemy and friend to each. They fell into routines, working during the day, eating together at night, sharing the small room that slowly started to feel less like a hiding spot and more like home. Thara played the bone flute sometimes, late at night when the town was quiet. Songs Keth had taught her, songs her mother had sung, songs she made up as she went, inventing melodies for this new life that had no old music to guide it. Rylan listened. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and just breathe, and Thara would watch him and think about how strange it was that a human could feel like home when her actual home was mountains and stone halls and the rough voices of her clan. One evening, about a month after they'd arrived, they were walking back from the market. Thara had bought vegetables, actual fresh vegetables, not dried rations. Rylan had haggled for bread that was still warm from the oven. "I got a letter," Rylan said suddenly. Thara stopped walking. "From my sister, Ellen. Somehow she tracked me down through a friend of a friend who knew someone in the borderlands. She's smart like that." "What did it say?" Rylan pulled the letter from his pocket. The paper was worn, like he'd been reading it over and over. "She says my parents think I'm dead, killed in action, that there was a memorial service, that the whole village mourned. Oh, she says she's glad I'm alive, that she doesn't care why I left, that she hopes I've found peace." Rylan's voice cracked slightly. "She says if I'm happy, that's all that matters." Thara took his hand. "Are you happy?" Rylan looked at her. At this orc woman who'd become his entire world in the span of weeks. At the life they'd built from nothing. "Yeah," he said, "I think I am." "Then your sister's right. That's all that matters." They walked home together, hands linked, carrying bread and vegetables and the weight of families who thought they were dead. It should have felt sad. Maybe it was sad. But it was also freedom. The strange freedom of getting to choose who you were instead of being told. That night, after dinner, Thara pulled out the stone brother Matthias had given her. The green one that was supposed to be for her collection of saved souls. "I think I need to add one," she said. "Who?" "You." Rylan looked confused. "I'm not dying." "No, but I saved you anyway. You were dying in a different way. Dying from hate and grief and a war that was eating you alive. And we saved each other from that." She placed the stone on the windowsill, next to a few others she'd been collecting. The young human guard who'd let them go. Brother Matthias himself, the innkeeper who'd given them a chance. Every person who'd chosen kindness when cruelty would have been easier. "We're building something," Thara said. "Not just a life. A collection of moments where people chose better." Rylan came to stand beside her, looking at the small pile of stones. Brother Matthias would approve. He'd probably say we're being sentimental. He'd be right. Thara turned to face Rylan. There was something she'd been feeling for weeks now, something that felt too big and too terrifying to name, but they'd already done impossible things. What was one more? "I love you," she said. Simple, direct, the way orcs said important things. Rylan's eyes went wide, then soft, then full of that particular kind of joy that hurt because it was so complete. "I love you too," he said. "Is that allowed? Can enemies fall in love? We're not enemies anymore. Then what are we? We're us, whatever that means, whatever we make it mean." Rylan kissed her. It was gentle and uncertain and perfect. It tasted like bread and hope, and the particular sweetness of choosing something instead of having it chosen for you. When they pulled apart, Thara rested her forehead against his again. That orc gesture of intimacy that meant more than words. "I want to build a life with you," Rylan said. "A real life, not just surviving, actually living." "Then let's live," Thara said, and they did. 6 months after arriving in Haven's Rest, Thara and Rylan opened a small shop, half smithy, half general goods. Thara made tools and weapons, mostly tools, because Haven's Rest didn't need more weapons. Rylan managed the business side, dealing with customers, keeping books, making sure they could pay rent. It shouldn't have worked. An orc and a human running a business together in a town of refugees. But Haven's Rest was built on things that shouldn't work, so maybe that's why it did. They got a bigger room, 2 windows instead of 1, a bed that didn't squeak, a small kitchen where Thara tried to cook orc recipes with human ingredients and usually created something that was edible, if not exactly traditional. Mara from next door became a friend. She'd teach Thara human customs, Thara taught her orc phrases. Little Kev would toddle between their rooms, belonging equally to both, proving every day that mixed didn't mean broken. Some nights Thara still dreamed about her clan, about her father, about Keth playing that bone flute by the fire. She'd wake up with tears on her face, and Rylan would hold her and remind her that choosing a new family didn't mean betraying the old one. Other nights Rylan dreamed about Aiden, about the brother he'd lost and the revenge that had nearly destroyed him. He'd wake up gasping, and Thara would pull him close and remind him that living was the best revenge against a war that wanted them all dead. They healed each other, slowly, in small moments, in quiet ways. A year after they arrived, a new refugee came to Haven's Rest. An orc warrior, older, with clan markings, Thara recognized immediately. Blackstone clan, her clan. The warrior's name was Vecra. She'd deserted 3 months ago after watching too many young orcs die for territory that meant nothing. She was looking for a new life, same as everyone else. Thara saw her in the market. They locked eyes. Recognition flashed between them. "You're Thara," Vecra said. "Chief's daughter. They think you died at Northridge Valley." "I did," Thara said. "That person died. I'm someone else now." Vecra looked at her, at Rylan standing beside her, at the life Thara had built. "Good," Vecra said. "She was dying anyway. That war kills everyone eventually. Better to die and become something new." They didn't become friends, exactly. But Vecra would stop by the shop sometimes, would share news about the clan. Her father was alive, still paralyzed, still proud. The war continued. People died. Nothing changed except the names of the dead. "Do you ever regret it?" Vecra asked once. "Leaving?" Thara looked around the shop, at the tools she'd made, at Rylan organizing inventory, at the life they'd built from 2 people who should have killed each other. "Every day," Thara said honestly, "and also never. Both things are true. That doesn't make sense." "No, but it's honest." 2 years after arriving in Haven's Rest, Thara and Rylan got married. Not a human wedding or an orc bonding. Something new, something theirs. They stood in the town square, with half the population watching, humans and orcs and dwarves and elves, and every combination of mixed heritage that proved love didn't care about species. There was no priest, no formal ceremony. Just Boss the innkeeper saying, "You two already chose each other. This is just making it official so we can have a party." Thara wore orc leathers with human embroidery. Rylan wore human clothes with orc clan patterns stitched into the collar. Mara stood up as witness, little Kev on her hip, proud as if he'd arranged the whole thing himself. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. "I promise to keep choosing you," Thara said. "Every day, even on the days when it's hard, especially on the days when it's hard." "I promise to keep seeing you," Rylan said. "Not as an orc, not as my enemy, just as Thara, the person who taught me that love is braver than hate." They kissed. The crowd cheered. Human cheers mixed with orc war cries, mixed with dwarven applause, mixed with elven whistles. A symphony of cultures that had learned to make harmony from differences. The party lasted until dawn. Someone brought out instruments. Thara played her bone flute. A human with a fiddle joined in. An orc drummer added rhythm. The music was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Rylan pulled Thara close as they danced. If you could call their swaying dancing. They were both terrible at it. Neither human dances nor orc ceremonial movements fit what they were doing. So they invented something new, moving together in ways that made sense only to them. "Happy?" Rylan asked. "Impossibly happy," Thara said, "which is the only kind of happy we know how to do." 3 years after arriving in Haven's Rest, Thara got pregnant. It shouldn't have been possible. Human and orc biology didn't work that way. Everyone said so, but apparently their bodies had decided that impossible was just a suggestion. The pregnancy was difficult. Brother Matthias, who'd retired to Haven's Rest himself after one too many battles to count, provided medical care. He added a stone to his collection the day Thara went into labor. Then another when the baby survived. They named her Kethlin. Keth for Thara's brother, Lyn for Rylan's mother, a name that belonged to both cultures and neither, a name that said, "We're building something new." Kethlin had green-tinged skin and Rylan's brown eyes, small tusks that would grow in properly with time, dark hair with a slight curl. She was proof that impossible was just a word people used before they figured out how to make it work. Holding her daughter, Thara understood something she'd never expected to learn, that love didn't divide, it multiplied. That choosing Rylan didn't mean unchoosing her clan, that building a new family didn't betray the old one, that hearts were bigger than anyone gave them credit for. "She's perfect," Rylan said, looking at their daughter with the kind of awe that came from creating life instead of destroying it. "She's impossible," Thara corrected, "but we're good at impossible." Kethlin grew up in a town where differences were normal, where having an orc mother and human father was just another variation of family, where the words enemy and monster meant nothing because everyone's parents had once been called those words. She learned to speak Common and Orcish fluently, learned human songs and orc war chants, learned that identity wasn't something you were given, but something you built, piece by piece, choice by choice. At 5 years old, Kethlin asked the question all children eventually ask, "Why don't we look the same?" She pointed at her green-tinged skin, then at Rylan's pale hand. "Why am I different?" Thara knelt down to her daughter's level. "Because different is what we are. Your papa is human. I'm orc. You're both. You're new. You're proof that different doesn't mean broken. But the other kids say humans and orcs are supposed to fight." "They used to," Rylan said, "before we chose different. Can I choose different too?" "You already are," Thara said. "Just by existing, you're choosing different. You're choosing that love is stronger than hate, that family is stronger than fear." Kethlin thought about this with the serious expression of a child processing complex truths. "I like choosing different." "Good," Thara said. "Never stop." 5 years after arriving in Haven's Rest, the war ended. Not with a grand treaty, not with armies surrendering, just with exhaustion. Both sides ran out of soldiers willing to die for territory no one really wanted. Ran out of families willing to sacrifice children for grudges older than anyone could remember. Peace came quietly, awkwardly. Borders opened slowly. Trade routes resumed. People who'd been enemies started being neighbors again, uncertain how to act around each other without weapons drawn. Haven's Rest became more than a refuge. It became a model, proof that humans and orcs could coexist, could build together, could create families and businesses and futures that included both. Diplomats came to study the town, to understand how it worked, to learn the rules that made peace possible when war had seemed inevitable. The rules were simple: no past, no fighting, no questions. Choose present over history. Choose people over propaganda. Choose love over hate. Simple rules, hard rules, but possible rules. Thara and Rylan gave tours sometimes, showing visitors their shop, their family, their life that had started with one human, choosing not to kill one orc on a battlefield full of corpses. "How did you make it work?" visitors always asked. "We just kept choosing each other," Rylan would say. We kept seeing each other as people first, Thara would add. Everything else came after. But the cultural differences are just details, Thara would finish. Love is bigger than details. 10 years after arriving in Haven's Rest, Thara's father died. Vecra brought the news. The old warrior had lived longer than anyone expected for someone paralyzed from a war wound, but time caught everyone eventually. Thara took 3 days to process it. Cried in Ryland's arms, played the bone flute until her fingers ached, told Kethlin stories about the grandfather she'd never met. Then she did something she'd been too afraid to do before. She wrote a letter to her clan, told them she was alive, told them about Haven's Rest, about Ryland, about Kethlin, about the life she'd built from choosing different. She didn't expect a response. The letter was more about saying things that needed to be said than about starting a conversation. 6 months later, a response came. It was from her uncle, now chief of the Blackstone clan. The letter was short, formal, but it said, "You were mourned, you are remembered, you are still clan, even from afar. Live well." Thara cried reading those 4 sentences, because they meant acceptance. Not agreement, not approval, but acceptance that she'd chosen her path, and they respected her right to walk it. That night, she added a new stone to her collection, for her clan, for letting her go, for proving that love could exist even across distance and difference and time. 15 years after arriving in Haven's Rest, Kethlin brought home a boy. He was human, nervous, polite, trying very hard not to stare at the orc mother or the mixed species family or the shop full of tools that looked like they could double as weapons. "This is Marcus," Kethlin said, and there was defiance in her voice, waiting for objection. Thara looked at Marcus, at her daughter, at the fear that came from thinking love might not be allowed. "Does he make you happy?" Thara asked. "Yes." "Then he's welcome." Just like that. No drama, no prohibition, because Thara had learned something important over 15 years. Love wasn't something you controlled. It was something you celebrated when you found it, regardless of what form it took. Marcus stayed for dinner, was awkward, spilled his drink, apologized 17 times. But he looked at Kethlin like she was the sun, and he was a plant that had been dying in darkness. After he left, Kethlin hugged her parents tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Ryland asked. "For teaching me that love is brave, that choosing someone is the most important choice you ever make." Thara held her daughter close, thought about a battlefield 15 years ago, about a human who chose mercy, about impossible becoming possible. "You learned well," she said. 20 years after arriving in Haven's Rest, Thara and Ryland stood on the ridge overlooking the town. The valley below had grown. More buildings, more people, more proof that different could work if you gave it a chance. Kethlin was married now, to Marcus. They lived in the next valley over, building their own impossible life. They had a daughter, Thara's granddaughter, who was even more impossible than Kethlin, because she was proof that mixed could mix again and create something new. 20 years, Ryland said. Feels longer and shorter at the same time. Thara leaned against him. They were older now, grey in his hair. Scars on her hands from years of forge work, but they were here, alive, together. "Do you regret it?" Ryland asked. "Ever?" "Every day," Thara said. "And also never. Both things are still true. That makes sense now. Only took 20 years. They stood in comfortable silence. Not the heavy silence of enemies, not the awkward silence of strangers. Just the easy silence of two people who'd spent 20 years learning how to be together. "Tell me again," Ryland said, "about the first time we met." Thara smiled. They'd told this story 100 times, to visitors, to friends, to their daughter. But it never got old, because it was the story of how impossible became possible. "I was dying," Thara began, "on a battlefield full of corpses. And I asked a human soldier to make it fast. But he froze," Ryland continued, "because he saw a person, not a monster. And his actions impressed me, because he chose mercy when revenge would have been easier. And we chose each other, every day, for 20 years. And we'll keep choosing, Thara finished, for as long as we can. They walked back down to Haven's Rest together. To the shop they'd built, to the life they'd created, to the community they'd helped shape. That night, Thara played the bone flute one more time. The same lullaby Keith had taught her 30 years ago. The one about being safe, even when the world wasn't safe. Rylan listened, eyes closed, peaceful, and Thara understood finally that this was what victory looked like. Not a battlefield with defeated enemies, but a small room with someone you loved, playing music that connected past and present, proving that choosing love wasn't naive or weak. It was the bravest thing anyone could do. The next morning, they opened their shop like always, greeted customers, made tools, sold goods, lived an ordinary, extraordinary life. Because sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is choose happiness when the world expects you to choose hate. Sometimes the bravest warriors are the ones who lay down their weapons and pick up hope instead. Sometimes enemies become family by deciding that enemy was just a word, and words could be changed by people brave enough to write new stories. And sometimes, on a battlefield full of death, one human soldier and one orc warrior choose different, and that choice echoes forward through years and generations, proving that impossible is just another way of saying no one's tried yet. 20 years after a human soldier froze instead of killing, Thara and Rylan had built proof that love was stronger than war. They'd built a family, a business, a community, a life. They'd built something worth dying for by choosing instead to live, and every morning when Thara woke up next to Rylan, she thought about that battlefield, about the words, "Please make it fast," about the choice that changed everything, and she smiled, because fast had been the wrong request. What she'd needed all along was slow, was patient, was someone willing to take the long, hard road that led to healing instead of the quick, easy path that led to death. She'd needed someone to see her, and Rylan had, and she'd seen him back, and together they'd proven that seeing each other, really seeing, with eyes that looked past skin color and species and propaganda, was the first step toward peace. Blood makes you orc. Blood makes you human, but love makes you family. And family is the only army worth fighting for. If this story touched your heart, if Thara and Rylan's impossible love reminded you that courage means choosing compassion over hate, then this channel needs you. Subscribe to Orcbound Tales and become part of a community that believes love is stronger than war, that enemies can become family, and that the bravest warriors are the ones who choose to heal instead of harm. Hit that like button if you believe impossible love stories deserve to be told. And leave a comment telling me, have you ever chosen someone when the world told you not to? Your story matters. Share it below. Remember, every subscription, every like, every comment tells YouTube that stories like this deserve to be heard. That fantasy isn't just about battles and dragons. It's about hearts that refuse to hate, even when hate would be easier. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in love that breaks boundaries. Until the next tale, stay brave, stay kind, and keep choosing different. This is Orcbound Tales, where impossible becomes possible, one story at a time.